have power over your mind, not outside events. So if they're silent, let them be silent. If they're distant, let them drift. You'll do what most people never will. You'll stay calm and take back control. In the next few minutes, you'll learn one Stoic trick, a simple but powerful practice to stop reacting and start leading yourself again. You'll discover the 48-hour Stoic protocol, how to pause, breathe, and reinvest your energy into emotional intelligence, inner peace, and quiet confidence. This isn't revenge. It isn't pretending you don't care. It's mastery, psychological boundaries, spiritual discipline, and self-worth that no one can touch. You're not becoming colder, you're becoming clearer. And when clarity comes, your value is no longer up for negotiation. If you're ready to stop begging to be seen and start seeing yourself, type in the comments, "I remain." Let's begin. There's always a moment, a subtle shift you can feel before you can explain. The messages become shorter, the tone turns colder. The attention that once felt natural begins to fade, and suddenly, the silence in the space between words feels louder than the words themselves. At first, you deny it. You tell yourself they're busy, distracted, tired. You make excuses for their distance. Because facing the truth feels too heavy, they no longer value you the way they once did. And that realization cuts deep, not just because of what it means about them, but because of what it reveals about you, about how much of your self-worth you've been outsourcing to someone else's attention. That's the first truth. The Stoic faces your value was never meant to depend on another's gaze. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." When someone stops seeing your worth, it doesn't mean your worth has vanished. It only means their perception has shifted, and your peace depends on whether you confuse the two. Most people react to this moment the same way with panic. They start chasing, proving, apologizing. They replay every memory like a crime scene, asking, "What did I do wrong?" But the Stoic doesn't chase ghosts. The Stoic studies reality. You see, their silence isn't punishment, it's feedback. It tells you where you've been over-investing, where you've built your identity on unstable ground. And that's the invitation to stop fighting for attention and start reclaiming direction. Seneca said, "The man who values himself at too low a rate will not be valued much by others." That's the law of perception. When you beg to be noticed, you reinforce your own invisibility. When you stop chasing, you become scarce. And scarcity breeds value. This is the first Stoic trick in motion, not revenge, not pride, but withdrawal with purpose. You stop explaining your worth to those who stopped listening. You stop trying to prove you deserve the basic respect you already earned. You step back, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, because what's happening right now isn't rejection, it's redirection. Life is asking you a brutal but sacred question. Can you still see your own value when no one else reflects it back to you? Most people can't. They collapse under the illusion that love must be earned, that attention must be deserved. That silence means they're not enough. But silence doesn't mean you're not enough. It means the season is changing. And in that change, your task is not to chase spring, it's to master winter. When you're ignored, undervalued, forgotten, you are standing in your training ground. This is where emotional intelligence is forged. This is where psychological boundaries harden. This is where you stop bleeding energy into places that no longer reciprocate. So what do? You observe without reacting. You breathe before replying. You watch, not with bitterness, but with curiosity. Because detachment is not indifference, it's awareness without addiction. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing others to value you, they start noticing you again. Not because you begged, but because your silence reintroduced mystery, because your energy became focused, contained, powerful. But by the time they notice, you won't crave it anymore, because you'll have built something stronger: self-command. That's what the Stoics lived for, to reach a state where no insult, no betrayal, no loss of affection could unseat their calm. And that's your first step today. Don't react. Don't chase. Don't explain. Pause. Let their silence echo, and let it teach you what you still need to strengthen within yourself. Because the truth is, you don't lose value when someone stops valuing you. You only lose awareness of it. And awareness, that's something you can rebuild right now. So, take a breath, feel the ache, and then say this quietly to yourself: their silence does not define me. My peace does. This is where your transformation begins. Not in being noticed again, but in no longer needing to be. Your emotions are your currency. Your attention, your time, your care, they are not infinite. Yet most people spend them recklessly, pouring their energy into people who have stopped investing back. They keep paying emotional debt to someone who no longer even notices the transaction. That's the first mistake the Stoic refuses to make. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In our context, that means stop trying to convince someone of your value. Live it. Stop spending emotional energy on proving you're worthy. Use that energy to become unshakable. Emotional economy is a Stoic art, the discipline of conserving your energy for what you can control, and withdrawing it from what you can't. It's understanding that attention is the purest form of power. And every time you give your attention to someone who undervalues it, you fund your own suffering. Think about it. When you chase someone's validation, you hand them your peace like a blank check. They get to decide your mood, your confidence, your self-image, and every time they withdraw affection, you go bankrupt. That is emotional poverty, the state of being rich in feeling but poor in control. The Stoic path reverses that. It builds emotional wealth, not by shutting down or pretending not to care, but by spending wisely. You learn to ask, before every reaction, is this purchase worth my peace? When someone disrespects you, do you spend your energy arguing, or do you save it for building a life so grounded they can't shake it? When someone withdraws affection, do you invest in chasing or in rebuilding your own foundation? The untrained mind believes love must always be proven. The disciplined mind understands love that must be chased isn't love. It's dependence. And dependence is a poor investment. So here's the Stoic rule. Guard your emotional budget like a king guards his treasury. Every thought, every reaction, every word costs something, and the more expensive your peace becomes, the less access others will have to disturb it. Senetsa varned. He who is brave is free, and freedom, in emotional terms, means no longer being enslaved by another person's inconsistency. It's the ability to feel deeply without losing balance, to care without collapsing, to give without being emptied. But make no mistake, this discipline isn't easy, because emotions want to spend. They crave expression, reaction, validation. When someone pulls away, the instinct is to prove your worth, to send one more message, to explain one more time. That's the emotional equivalent of throwing coins into a fire, hoping the flames will soften. They won't. They'll consume everything until you decide to walk away from the blaze. So how do you practice emotional economy? You start by noticing the leak. Who drains your energy the fastest? Who do you think about most, not because you admire them, but because you're trying to be seen by them? Those are your emotional debts. And the moment you name them, you begin to reclaim them. Next, you replace reaction with reflection. When you feel the urge to reach out, pause. Ask yourself, am I trying to connect or am I trying to be chosen? One comes from abundance. The other comes from lack. And finally, you reinvest. You take all that energy you've been wasting on uncertainty and you redirect it into mastery, into reading, into training, into silence, into the quiet routines that rebuild your inner empire brick by brick. Because this is what the Stoics knew: attention is creation. Whatever you focus on grows. If you focus on loss, you expand the wound. If you focus on growth, you expand your capacity to heal. So be wise with where you place your mind. Don't give the same energy to someone who ignores you that you could be giving to the future version of yourself. You are not meant to be emotionally broke, begging for validation that should have never been outsourced in the first place. The Stoic does not chase payment from others, they build wealth within. They know that peace is the highest currency, and discipline is how you earn it. So from now on, treat your emotions as sacred capital. Do not waste them on arguments that don't align with your growth. Do not pour them into people who cannot hold them. And never, ever, give away your calm just to prove you still care. Because the moment you start managing your energy like the treasure it truly is, you stop living at the mercy of others, and you start living in mastery of yourself. And that, right there, is the first form of real power. There's a moment in every heartbreak when you realize the real pain isn't what they did, it's what you refuse to accept. You saw the distance growing. You felt the silence stretching, but you kept holding on, not to them, but to the story you built around them, to the hope that one more effort, one more message, one more act of love would bring everything back. And yet, deep down, you knew the truth. They had already let go. That's the moment the Stoic calls the beginning of wisdom. Because freedom doesn't arrive when others stay. It begins when you stop resisting what is. Epictetus said, "Seek not for events to happen as you wish, but wish for events to happen as they do, and your life will flow smoothly." That's not surrender. That's self-command. It's choosing clarity over denial, truth over fantasy, peace over panic. Most people fight reality with emotion. They try to negotiate with loss, to bargain with absence. They replay what should have been instead of facing what is. But that resistance is what turns pain into suffering. It's not their distance that breaks you, it's your refusal to accept it. Acceptance isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's standing face to face with reality, without excuses, without illusions, and saying, "This hurts, but I will not run from it." That's courage to stay present with what's real, even when it's uncomfortable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Read that again slowly. He's saying the hurt doesn't come from their silence. It comes from your interpretation of it. And interpretations can be changed. When someone stops valuing you, the mind immediately creates a narrative. I'm not enough. I must have failed. I need to fix this. But these are not facts. They're emotional stories. And every story that begins with, "I'm not enough," ends with self-destruction. So the Stoic stops the story early. They pause. They breathe. They ask one question, what's in my control here? Because that question slices through illusions like a blade. Can you control how they feel? No. Can you control what they choose? No. Can you control how you interpret it? Yes. And that's where your power hides, in the small but sacred space between what happens and how you respond. Acceptance doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means you stop fighting the current and start learning how to swim. When someone drifts away, you don't chase. You stand still, observe the tide, and trust that what's meant for your peace will never require begging. Here's a truth. Few admit what you lose in people. You often gain in perspective. The absence they leave becomes the space you finally use to hear yourself again. Their silence forces you to face your own voice. Their indifference reveals where you've been investing in illusions, and that clarity, though painful, is sacred. The Stoic doesn't pretend. Loss doesn't sting. They simply refuse to let that sting dictate their next move, because they know reality. When accepted, heals. When denied, it haunts. So what does acceptance look like in practice? It looks like deleting the message you'll regret. It looks like closing the chat window and opening your journal instead. It looks like sitting in silence at midnight, feeling the ache but not letting it turn you bitter. It's saying, I cannot control who values me, but I can control whether I value myself less because of it. Acceptance doesn't erase pain, it transforms it into wisdom. It's the bridge between heartbreak and peace, between chaos and calm. It's how the Stoic reclaims their power without ever raising their voice. So today, if you feel forgotten, overlooked, or replaced, don't resist the truth. Face it, feel it, and let it free you. Because the moment you stop chasing what left is the same moment you start returning to yourself. This is freedom, not in being untouched by pain, but in learning how to walk through it without losing your balance. The Stoics didn't seek a life without loss. They sought a mind that could endure it with grace. And when you reach that place, when you can look at what's gone and whisper, "I accept," you'll realize something profound. You didn't lose them. You found yourself. There's a silence that cuts deeper than words. It doesn't shout. It doesn't slam doors. It simply ignores. The kind of silence that says, "You no longer matter here." And suddenly, you're invisible to the very person who once saw everything in you. That silence doesn't just hurt. It shakes your identity. Because when someone who once celebrated your presence now looks through you, you begin to question whether you were ever seen at all. But here's the truth: the Stoic understands. Indifference is not always an insult. Sometimes, it's a mirror showing you where you've been depending on others to confirm your worth. And that reflection can be brutal. When someone's energy changes, when their eyes stop lighting up, your first instinct is to chase the warmth back. You start to perform, talk more, give more, bend more, thinking you can fix the distance with effort. But every move only widens the gap, because desperation is not attractive, and neediness never restores respect. So the Stoic does something different. They stop performing and start observing. They look at indifference as data, not disaster. They don't ask, "Why are they doing this to me?" They ask, "Why does their indifference have this much power over me?" That's the pivot, the psychological shift from reaction to revelation. Because when you stop seeing their silence as rejection and start seeing it as reflection, you uncover your attachments. You discover the places where your peace still depends on someone else's attention. Epictetus said, "When someone acts badly toward you, remember they do so because they believe it is right." He didn't say to like it. He said to understand it. Their withdrawal isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's clarity. They're simply living from their own nature, their own perception, their own limits. That's their world, not yours. Indifference, when faced with strength, becomes a teacher. It shows you how to build stability in the absence of validation. It teaches you how to remain calm when ignored, how to remain kind when dismissed, how to remain whole when unseen. That's emotional mastery, not to be unfeeling, but to feel deeply and still not be ruled by feeling. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." This isn't denial, it's discernment. He's saying that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Because suffering begins when you make someone's indifference a reflection of your inadequacy. But it's not. Their silence says nothing about your value. It only reveals the limits of their capacity to appreciate it. So what do you do when you face indifference? You become your own source of attention. You redirect the energy you used to spend on being noticed into something that makes you proud to notice yourself. You create. You learn. You rebuild. You stop waiting for someone to make you feel significant and start living like significance was already yours. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop begging for care. You stop explaining your worth to those who've decided to misunderstand it. You stop contorting yourself into smaller shapes to fit spaces that have already closed. You choose self-respect over self-pity. You choose stillness over reaction. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. The mirror begins to shift. Because when you no longer react to indifference, you remove its power. You take back authorship of your story. The Stoic doesn't chase closure. They become closure. They don't need the other person to admit what they lost. They know, and they carry that knowing quietly like armor, not anger. Because when you reach this level of calm, you've already won a battle. Most people never fight the war against needing to be validated. So when you feel invisible, remember this. Invisibility is freedom in disguise. It gives you space to rediscover yourself. It gives you time to rebuild your center without distraction. It gives you silence. And in that silence, you can finally hear your own voice again. Let their indifference be the lesson that reawakens your independence. Let their silence teach you that your presence never needed permission to be valuable. And let their absence remind you that the only validation that truly matters is the one you give yourself when no one else is watching. Because when you stop reacting to indifference, you stop being controlled by it. You become untouchable not because you don't feel, but because you've mastered what you feel. And that's when you realize their indifference didn't break you. It revealed the part of you that no longer needs their attention to shine. There comes a point when silence is no longer about peace. It's about principle. It's the quiet moment when you realize, I will not beg to be valued. That is the line of self-respect, and once you draw it, you never erase it. People who undervalue you are testing something, not your patience, your boundaries. They want to see how much of yourself you're willing to give just to stay close. How many times you'll explain your worth before you finally remember you don't need to. This is where most fall in the space between love and self-respect. They confuse endurance with loyalty, tolerance with strength. But the Stoic knows endurance without dignity is not virtue. It's surrender disguised as devotion. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." The Stoic interpretation: stop debating whether they deserve another chance. Live as if your value is non-negotiable, because it is. Self-respect isn't arrogance. It's alignment. It's knowing who you are and refusing to act beneath that knowledge. When someone disrespects you and you remain calm, that's power. When you walk away without a word, that's control. When you no longer explain your standards, that's mastery. But make no mistake, holding that line is hard. Because the heart wants to forgive faster than the mind can forget. You'll feel the pull maybe if I just try again. Maybe they'll change. Maybe this time they'll see my worth. Those are the echoes of emotional habit, your past trying to negotiate with your growth. The Stoic response: stillness, not revenge, not reaction. Just quiet consistency. Because when you no longer break your own boundaries, people learn you are not a revolving door. You are a fortress. Seneca wrote, "He who respects himself is safe from others." Read that again. Safety isn't found in distance. It's found in discipline, in refusing to let anyone, including yourself, cross the line of dignity. So, how do you hold that line in practice? You start by defining it. What behavior crosses your threshold? What energy drains your spirit? Write it. Speak it. Live it. because boundaries that exist only in the mind are easy to ignore. Boundaries expressed through consistent action become law, then enforce it without apology. You don't need to explain why you walked away. You don't need to justify why you stopped responding. Silence is explanation enough. Absence is evidence. The mature form of self-respect doesn't announce itself. It simply withdraws from disrespect permanently. But here's what separates strength from bitterness. You walk away without hate. You don't need to curse their name or wish them harm, because hatred still ties you to them. And the Stoic seeks freedom, not vengeance. Detachment is the higher revenge. It leaves them wondering how you stayed so calm when they expected you to crumble. Your calm is the closure. Your silence is the lesson. Your peace is the punishment. The more you practice this, the more your energy shifts. You start carrying yourself differently. You move slower. You speak less. You no longer chase validation. You attract respect. Because people can feel when someone has made peace with their own worth. It's magnetic. It's untouchable. Self-respect is not built overnight. It's forged every time you choose not to break your standards for temporary comfort. Every time you say no to what insults your soul. Every time you keep your energy sacred when the world tries to cheapen it. And once that line is drawn, your aura changes. Those who used to manipulate you lose their leverage. Those who tried to guilt trip, you lose access. Because they realize you've outgrown the version of yourself who tolerated less than you deserved. That's what the Stoics mean by sovereignty. Not ruling others, but ruling yourself. It's the quiet crown you wear when you no longer need anyone's permission to stand tall. So hold that line, not out of pride, but out of peace. Not to punish them, but to protect you, because the moment you honor your worth, you teach the world how to treat you. And when you master that, you no longer chase respect. You radiate it. There is a silent power that few ever master, the ability to withdraw your energy without bitterness. No announcement, no revenge. Just quiet detachment that speaks louder than any argument ever could. Because when you pull back, what once gave them life, your time, your attention, your emotional investment, they feel the void. And that void becomes your greatest weapon. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think it means coldness, indifference, not caring at all. But true detachment isn't the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of it. It's the art of feeling deeply while refusing to be controlled by those feelings. When you withdraw your energy, you're not punishing them, you're protecting yourself. You're saying, I no longer invest where there is no return. And that shift changes everything. Because here's the truth. What you feed grows. When you feed chaos with attention, it thrives. When you feed peace with silence, it expands. Energy flows where focus goes, and the Stoic knows how to redirect it with surgical precision. Seneca once said, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." Self-conquest is the foundation of all power, and detachment is its battlefield. When you no longer respond to provocation, when you no longer seek closure, when you stop trying to be understood, you begin to reclaim the energy that was leaking into the hands of others. This is psychological alchemy, turning emotional pain into spiritual power. Because every time you choose silence over reaction, you train your nervous system to stop being addicted to chaos. You're teaching yourself to stay centered while others spin out of control. That is what terrifies manipulators the most, when the person they once controlled with emotions no longer reacts. When your silence becomes unpredictable, when your detachment becomes unreadable. They can't argue with calm. They can't guilt-trip someone who feels no need to explain. They can't manipulate a person who has stopped seeking validation. Your withdrawal forces them to confront something they can't escape: their own emptiness. And that's where your true leverage is born. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks away quietly, carrying peace as its crown. But let's be clear, detachment is not escapism. It's not running away from pain. It's walking through it with discipline. It's saying, I acknowledge what happened, but I refuse to lose myself because of it. The weak detach to avoid feeling. The strong detach to remain feeling without being enslaved by it. So how do you practice this in daily life? Start with awareness. Notice where your attention goes when you feel rejected. Notice who occupies your thoughts long after they've stopped earning that privilege. Every replay, every imaginary argument, every attempt to decode their silence, that's energy. And energy is power. You can't afford to give it away freely anymore. Next, redirect it. Instead of asking, why did they do this to me? Ask, what is this teaching me? Replace rumination with reflection. Replace reaction with creation. Go for a walk. Train your body. Write in silence. Build something small, a routine, a habit, a version of yourself that no longer needs to chase closure. This is how you shift from dependency to dominance, not by trying to control others, but by mastering yourself so deeply that their behavior no longer dictates your state of mind. Detachment turns chaos into clarity. It transforms heartbreak into discipline. It redefines strength, not as resistance to emotion, but as harmony with it. Because when you withdraw your energy consciously, you stop being drained and start being dangerous, not in a violent sense, but in a spiritual one. Your calm becomes intimidating. Your silence becomes power. Your self-control becomes legend. People will notice the shift. They'll wonder why they can no longer reach you. They'll test you, try to provoke the old version of you. But you won't respond. Because you've already learned the ultimate truth of Stoicism, you don't win by reacting. You win by remaining centered while everything else burns. The Stoic doesn't escape the storm. He becomes the still point within it. That's what withdrawal really means. Not retreat, but redirection. Not weakness, but wisdom. And when you reach that level of calm, you'll realize something profound. You didn't lose them. You simply stopped losing yourself to them. There's a strange thing that happens when you finally walk away. At first, it feels like loss, like you've given up on something that once defined you. But give it time, and that distance begins to work in ways you never expected. Because silence doesn't just end connections, it exposes them. It reveals who needed your energy to feel powerful, who fed off your presence to fill their emptiness, and who falls apart the moment you stop feeding the bond. The Stoics understood this reversal deeply. They knew that distance, when used consciously, is not weakness, it's strategy. You're not escaping the battle. You're changing the terrain. You're pulling the enemy out of familiar ground, their control, their drama, their manipulation, and forcing them to face a new environment where you no longer participate in the game. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And what does that mean here? It means that the greatest retaliation against disrespect is not to mirror it, but to rise so far above it that your very silence becomes humiliation to those who tried to break you. Distance reverses the power dynamic. When you stop chasing, they start wondering. When you stop explaining, they start speculating. When you stop showing emotion, they start feeling it. Because human psychology works on contrast, we crave what withdraws. We undervalue what's always available. That's not manipulation. That's behavioral truth. Your absence becomes a mirror to their actions. They begin to see the reflection of their own disrespect. Every ignored message, every cold glance, every word they used to hurt you now echoes back in the quiet space you've created. And suddenly, they feel it. Not because you forced them to, but because you finally stopped cushioning them from the consequences of their own behavior. This is the Stoic form of justice, not through revenge, but through reflection. You make them confront themselves by simply refusing to engage. Seneca called it contumacia animi, the unyielding firmness of mind. It's not resistance against others, but against the impulse to break your silence for closure that won't come. It's psychological strength disguised as calm detachment. But here's the beauty: the same distance that confuses them is what heals you. Because absence isn't just punishment, it's purification. Every day apart detoxes you from their emotional chaos. Every quiet morning resets your nervous system. Every moment of solitude refocuses your attention back to where it belongs: your purpose, your peace, your progress. The Stoic doesn't use distance to provoke guilt. He uses it to restore gravity, to remind both himself and others that access to his mind and spirit is a privilege, not a right. And when you begin to embody that energy, something magnetic happens. People sense that you've detached, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You no longer need their validation. You no longer explain your value. You've moved from emotional dependency to emotional authority. That shift changes everything, because those who once underestimated you begin to feel the cold edge of your silence. They remember how it felt when your energy lit up a room, when your attention made them feel important. And now, with that gone, they start to realize they weren't the powerful one. You were. Distance reveals that truth better than any confrontation ever could. It shows them what they lost, and shows you what you gained: clarity, control, composure. But let's be honest, the silence won't always feel strong at first. There will be nights when the urge to reach out feels unbearable, when your mind replays old moments like a broken record. That's the test. That's where strength is forged, not in never feeling the pull, but in choosing not to act on it. Because every time you resist the urge to return, you build the muscle of emotional sovereignty. And that's how distance transforms from pain into power. Not because it changes them, but because it changes you. It gives you back your focus, your rhythm, your peace. It reminds you that you were never powerless, you were just distracted. So, let the silence work. Let the distance do what words never could. They may not understand it today, but they will feel it in the quiet moments when your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. Because when you master the psychology of reversal, you don't chase validation anymore, you attract accountability. And that is the highest form of control. Once the noise fades, something beautiful and terrifying begins. Silence. Real silence. The kind that isn't just around you, but inside you. No more constant messages. No more emotional chaos to manage. Just stillness. For most people, that stillness feels unbearable. They mistake it for loneliness. But the Stoic knows better. Silence is not emptiness. It's space. Space for rebuilding. Space for self-respect to take root again. Space to construct the empire within that no one can destroy. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly." That's what this calm is. The construction phase of power. It's the moment after the storm when you begin to rebuild, not from desperation, but from design. You see, detachment isn't the end of your story, it's the clearing of the battlefield. Now, you decide what stays and what goes. Now, you start to rebuild your temple brick by brick, choice by choice, thought by thought, and the first brick, discipline, not the kind that punishes, but the kind that protects. You begin to rise early, not for productivity, but for peace. You journal not to vent, but to clarify. You read not to escape, but to expand. This is how the Stoic rebuilds, through quiet, consistent acts of self-respect. Because when you detach from what doesn't value you, you free up energy you didn't even realize was being drained. And that energy, once redirected, becomes momentum. You start walking differently. You speak with fewer words but deeper weight. You move through your days with presence, not pressure. People notice, but they can't quite explain why. That's because your aura shifts. You stop seeking peace and start embodying it. Your calm becomes your command, and your silence becomes your statement. This is the phase most people skip: the quiet rebuilding, the internal reconstruction. They rush to prove they've moved on, to post about their healing, to show the world they're thriving. But the Stoic does the opposite. He rebuilds in private, in sacred secrecy. He allows the roots of his strength to grow deep, so when he re-emerges, he doesn't have to announce anything. His presence speaks for itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So ask yourself, what are you painting your soul with now? Are your thoughts still anchored in the past, or are they constructing something permanent, something sovereign? Because this is the stage where your mind becomes your empire, and that empire must be ruled wisely. You no longer fight battles that don't matter. You no longer explain your worth to those who can't recognize it. You no longer chase validation, you cultivate virtue. You invest your time into mastery, your craft, your body, your peace. The truth is, peace after detachment feels strange at first, because drama, chaos, disrespect. They were stimulation. And silence feels boring compared to the adrenaline of dysfunction. But boredom, for the Stoic, is the birthplace of greatness. It's in that quiet space where you begin to hear your own voice again, the one you drowned out trying to please everyone else. Now you can hear it clearly. It whispers, focus. It reminds you, you've always had the power. It guides you to rise, not in rage, but in rhythm with your purpose. Every act of restraint becomes a declaration: I no longer serve chaos. I no longer negotiate my worth. I no longer explain peace to those who thrive on pain. And slowly, your calm becomes intimidating. People sense it. They can't provoke you anymore. They can't predict you. You've mastered the rare art of emotional detachment, not because you feel nothing, but because you choose what's worth feeling. That's what makes you unstoppable. Because while they're busy chasing attention, you're building substance. While they're reacting, you're refining. And while they're talking about you, you're training in silence. This is how legends are formed, not through chaos, but through composure, not through noise, but through necessity. You've detached, yes, but more importantly, you've ascended. You've learned that peace isn't passive. It's a weapon, sharp, silent, and sacred. And when you master it, you don't need to prove your power. You become it. So now you understand. You were never losing them. You were shedding them. Because when someone stops valuing you, that isn't rejection, it's revelation. It shows you who was only loyal to your light, and who could stand with you in your shadows. The truth is, you don't need closure from people who already showed you who they are. You don't need to beg for respect. That should have been mutual. You don't need to fight for space in hearts that shrink when you walk in. Let them go, not with anger, but with awareness. Because when you let go in peace, the universe hands you back yourself, your focus, your clarity, your strength. And that's when you become truly dangerous, calm, detached. Untouchable. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. So, guard your thoughts like a fortress. Don't let the memory of small minds rent space in the palace of your purpose. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you evolve. Every time you choose peace over pride, you rise. Every time you walk away instead of explaining, you reclaim your power. This isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about remembering what truly deserves your care. And when you master that, you'll watch everything that once drained you start to fade quietly into the background. You'll realize